In this section, we're going to talk about the role of directives in our AngularJS applications. Now let's start off by addressing the question, what exactly is a directive? Well, this definition you see here is straight from the angularjs.org website, and it says markers on a DOM element that tell AngularJS's HTML compiler, the compile provider, which we'll be learning about, to attach a specified behavior to that DOM element. So really what we're saying here is that we can do, just like we've done with normal AngularJS built-in directives such as ngRepeat, ngIf, and others, we can build a custom directive that we can attach to a DOM element in multiple ways. And you'll see there's actually 4 ways we can do that. We'll learn about that as we move along here. Now, if you really break it down, Angular directives are all about teaching HTML new tricks. We need to add calendar functionality or convert maybe a JSON object into a tabular data type structure. Or maybe we want to show a map. We could also use it to handle some type of an event. So there's a lot of different ways we can use directives. In fact, if we were to break it down into categories, we could say that we can manipulate the DOM, we can iterate through data, and you've probably seen this with something like ngRepeat. We could handle different events. Now there's a lot of directives built in to do that, but you might have a custom scenario where you want to handle an event and do something very specific to your app. We could also tweak styles. We could modify CSS classes, add inline styles, or do other type of style related operations. We could even validate data and do custom data validation. And then finally, we could do something like data binding, and maybe we want to do some custom data binding. Now there's even more. This is certainly not a full list, but this is a list that will give you really the highlights of the different things we can do with our custom AngularJS directives. Now, as mentioned, AngularJS obviously has a lot of built-in directives. So we have things to handle forms. We can do validation, for instance, of a length of something or make sure it's a minimum. We can do different behaviors, which would be our events, detecting blur and click and mouse events and things along those lines. We could handle data binding in different ways. So obviously from this list, we have ngModel is probably the most common one we'd use, but maybe you're working with an image and you want to use ngSource to make sure the image doesn't display until the data binding happens. And then we have our application level ones. We could do ngApp, ngController, and then finally, here's a few DOM-related built-in AngularJS directives to disable things, show or hide things, iterate through things like ngRepeat, and more. Now, we're not going to be talking in this course about the built-in directives per se, although you'll see later we may actually tie those into our own custom directives. But we are going to learn the process behind these directives and see how we can apply that to build our own. Now, when it comes to building directives, we don't always have to build our own. Now, you might want to do it just for fun, but in reality, there's a lot of directives out there. So the first thing I do is go search for those because I'm not going to reinvent the wheel if there's something good I can choose. Now, here's a couple you could look at. So we have the UI Bootstrap directives, and this is a robust set of directives. I've used them in a lot of projects, actually, that provide functionality that you really don't want to have to write on your own. We also have Angular Strap, which is very similar actually in the types of directives they provide. Angular UI Grid is very specific to a grid or data grid type of functionality. And then things like Angular Translate allow us to do multilingual type apps, and maybe you want Spanish or French or English or something like that to be displayed in your app. Although those are available, and I would highly recommend you check those out first and other projects, you can go to github.com and find quite a few. Sometimes you're going to search and search and search and just kind of feel like you're out in the desert. And what do you do if there's not a directive that meets your needs? Well, that's hopefully why you're here and taking this course. We simply kick back and write our own directive. We're going to have some fun and write custom directives, and that's really what this course is all about. Is when we have exhausted our search and we don't have a built-in Angular directive or find a third-party one, what do we do? Well, that's what we're going to talk about.